Thank you. I'm super excited to be here. My name is Tanya Koshy. I lead the product team at UserTesting. Prior to that, I've worked on teams at Facebook and Google and Groupon. So this is sort of my cumulative wisdom over that time. Today, I'm going to tell you a story of how at UserTesting we used customer feedback and fast customer feedback to build a product for fast customer feedback. So this is going to be fun, and I want it to be really useful and valuable for all of you. So let's talk about what you're going to get out of this talk. So 3 things. First are a set of tactics to build an understanding of your customer. Second is a framework for getting buy-in across your organization around that understanding. And third, it's the ability to do all of that fast. So why does this matter at the end of the day? I think our jobs as folks who build and design products is all about winning the hearts and minds of our customers and of our organizations. So let me tell you a little bit more. I think it's supremely important when we're building products to minimize the time to customer value. And this is why I like to start by building an understanding of the customer, because what I find is if I do that systematically, I'm able to get product that's successful quickly out the door. Another thing that's important is building that understanding and building a shared understanding of the customer across the organization and across your company. One of the things that I always talk about with my team is that a product isn't just the pixels that you deliver to a screen. A product is experienced in how it's marketed, in how it's sold, in how it's supported. And so the people that do all of that within your company need to have a really deep understanding and alignment around your vision for that product and understand the value to the customer so that they can help you realize that product experience. And finally, I'm a pragmatist, and I don't know how many of you deal with this quite frequently. I think one of the hardest parts about being a product manager, which I am, or anybody who builds products, is dealing with once you get excited about a product idea and you're trying to get out the door, there's all the second guessing, there's all that debating, there are the hippos, the highest paid person's opinion. And what I find is that that really slows down the product development process. And so I like to take an evidence-based approach to building my products to nip that debating in the bud so we can get product out the door faster. So let me give you a little bit of context around what we were trying to do at UserTesting. UserTesting, we are a product that has a lot of traction with designers and researchers. And what we found is that there's a segment of product folks like PMs, engineers who use us, but there are barriers to use as well. So we wanted to target this audience of PMs in particular and make a strategic bet by going after a new audience as a company. But this was big. This was a huge kind of change for the company. And if you have ever been at a place where people say we're going to make a strategic bet, what often starts happening is a lot of debating and a lot of ideating, which can be good, but you can also get into these religious wars. And so what I wanted to do is really quickly, because I didn't want to run into any organizational fatigue, I wanted to quickly validate that we had a market and that we really had a problem within that market and a viable solution. So how did I do this? I talked about getting to that shared understanding of the customer. And what does that look like? And that's what I'm going to talk through today. When we build products, and when I build products and have in the past, there are 3 questions that I focus on answering. The first is just, who is my customer? The second, what is their problem? The third, what's the best, lightest solution that I can build for them? Now, through the process of building products, I always tell my team, what we're trying to do is to refine our understanding of these three questions. We're not ever getting to certainty, and you're never going to answer these questions definitively at any point in time. So when you start building a product, you may have hypotheses, and your level of certainty is very low. But what you're trying to do is get out into the field, talk to customers, validate your ideas, do some user research quickly, and refine your understanding of these questions. Build something, learn some more, keep refining. Think of this as a probability field. It's not actually a set of answers, and you're constantly refining your understanding of these. That's really important to understanding your customer and getting to product success. But equally important, and this is something that I think we often underestimate the importance of within organizations, is getting organizational buy-in around that shared understanding of the customer. So what I like to do, and what we did when we started building our product for product managers, which is called Product Insight, I wanted to start by getting alignment within my core team around that shared understanding of the customer. And then what I do is I think about who do I need to get aligned and bought into this idea, and I start to work my way out from my core team. I get alignment within each circle of this diagram, and I work my way out. And I'm sharing our understanding of our customer, where we are with the product at any given time, and I'm trying to get alignment and buy-in, and I'm working my way out. You can do this differently when you map your organization. It depends on the size of the product. For us, when we were building Product Insight, it was a big strategic bet. I wanted to work my way in from the core team all the way out to the entire company. So it always starts with the core team, getting that team aligned around that understanding of the customer. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the organizational layers first, and then we'll talk about how you get that shared understanding of the customer and how we did. Our core teams at UserTesting, our squads, I have focused on making them highly cross-functional. So there's a PM, there's a designer, there's an engineering lead, a couple of engineers. I also like to ensure that product marketing is actually considered a part of the squad very early and is involved in sort of the whole development lifecycle, as well as data science and user research. So we don't always have one-to-one mappings of these folks to our squads, but I like to push this notion that a squad is this broad cross-functional team and get all of these folks involved in thinking about the product development process. It's really important, I think, to engage everyone on the team in gathering customer feedback and doing the research to get to the answers that we were trying to get to around those three key product areas. Why? What I find is that the people on the squads, these are the people who are going to build this product. They really need to understand the customer firsthand. They need to build empathy. Now, often, people will be at different stages of how willing they are to get involved in research. So I sort of adjust and communicate through multiple channels to meet each person's needs on the squad. So I will often send Slack updates. This is our research plan. These are the questions that we're asking. Anybody have feedback? This is when we're doing interviews. Does someone want to conduct an interview? Does someone want to be note taker? At every stage of that research planning process, which shouldn't take very long, I'm trying to get folks involved, and I'm communicating across these different channels. At the end of the day, no one wants to build something that they don't understand or aren't bought into. They also realistically can't build something that they don't really understand. So when you're doing research to get to those three sort of questions and answers, you really want to maximize research efficiency, right? I promised you that I was going to talk about how you do all of this fast. So one of the things that I found is extremely important before you start doing research is just being transparent about the key research questions, the methodology, and success criteria. It's just important that everybody be bought into that. I have often gone and done research, and then everybody quibbles with the findings when we come back. I also think it's supremely important to set success criteria around the decision that you're gonna make. So if X happens, we're gonna do Y. If Z happens, we're gonna do A, right? Really important that you also set that success and decision criteria up front so you don't get locked into any type of analysis paralysis. Then you go and do the research and share the findings. And you're constantly reinforcing the importance of this evidence-based approach, so you're grounding everybody in the data. It cuts down on all of the debating and the cherry picking and the opinionating. And supremely important, I like to time box all our research activities to move really fast, and I set those expectations with the group up front. So I think of everything like, what are we gonna do in 1 to 2 weeks? We're gonna conduct interviews, we're gonna come back with findings, and we're actually gonna iterate on a design or our understanding of the customer problem and solution. You wanna push yourself and your teams, and you wanna set those milestones, and you wanna be aggressive in time boxing all of your activities. So then you've started with the core team, you've started to do some research, you wanna start radiating out your findings through the organization along those layers that I talked about. And I'll dive into how you sort of think about and identify your stakeholder groups. So for me, I thought about the core team, we talked about that. I then thought about, because this was a huge strategic bet for our company, who are our executive sponsors? I thought about my managers needing to be bought in. I also thought about our executive team needing to be bought in, right? Our CEO, our CMO, our chief revenue officer, and our co-founders. These are the key folks, because these are the people who you need to leverage their expertise in building out your product. You wanna make sure they're aligned and bought in really early. The worst thing ever is to start building product and be pretty far down the road and have your CEO ask you questions. It's extremely demoralizing for everybody involved and panic-inducing, if you've ever been there, of why are we doing this? What's going on? So to cut down on that second guessing, I get alignment at this level really early. And it helps then to have those people aligned, and then they will help you push that message down and through the org. They're gonna help you champion all of this. Then I think about going out to my sales and support folks. These are, for us, they were key frontline folks in supporting this product, right? One of the mantras that I always used to repeat to my team is, this is a big strategic bet for this company. We're gonna spend a lot of time building this product. If our sales team does not sell it, we don't have a product. So one of the things that we always talked about is both how you have a minimum viable and sellable product. And I think that's key. That's some of the practical realities of having multiple products that a sales team can sell. You want to think about how you get them bought in so that they will sell the newest thing, which is often difficult, right, when they're selling an existing product and are super comfortable with that audience. And they're important, like I said, to realizing they're the face of your product. And I think we don't often think about salespeople in that way, but it's supremely important that they're brought in and trained. Then I actually got the entire sort of leadership team of our company oriented around this, as well as doing sort of company-wide brown bags. At each stage of this, I want to be really clear, because often when I talk about this, one of the first things my team asks me is, are you asking for permission in every one of these meetings? I am absolutely not asking for permission. I am asserting my point of view, I'm sharing our findings, and what I'm always asking is, how does this resonate with your experience, right? And any feedback you get, you sort of take into account, and then I actually bring that all back to the core team and start radiating out the process again. And when you're doing this, you really want to find the right forum. So for all of the different groups that we talked about, sometimes when it was very early, and this is a big bet, I want to, in a kind of safe place, talk about some of these things. I would often do one-on-ones with our executives. I would then have a bi-weekly executive review where we took the executive team that I talked about through just, this is where we are, this is what we've learned, this is what we're doing. We would go to team meetings with the sales team to keep them up to date. I promised the company when we were gonna do this, And it's important to commit to things up front. It holds you accountable. And it sort of ensures that you will do it when you're in, the very busy kind of process of building a product. You want to make communication a key sort of focus, and it's easy to lose track. So I told the company every month, we started this in August, and we sort of had a target date by which I wanted to have something to start beta testing, which was in January at our sales kickoff. I told them between now and January, we wanted to set aggressive dates. I'm going to do a monthly brown bag with all of you, and I'm going to tell you where we are. And I set expectations. I said, look, we may find that this is not the right thing for us, but I want to be clear and transparent about that as we go. We also did recorded trainings. So any forum that you can find to meet all of these people and connect with them is key. So that's kind of how you think about your organization and how to share information. But let's go back to those 3 questions that I talked about. And let's talk about how you go about answering those questions quickly. So the first 2 are the ones that I tend to pair together. Who is my customer and what is their problem? So when we were doing this and we were trying to understand product teams and PMs, we always started with a set of needs discovery interviews. And this is actually a standard set of questions that I have found to be really useful for most things that I work on. So what I'm trying to do, we were trying to understand, how do product managers think about customer feedback? How do they use customer insights and data today? How do they do research? And I wanted to understand that problem space and understand their experience to try and identify key needs in that area that we would possibly be able to solve for. And I had some hypotheses about what I thought we could solve for, but I always start these interviews very high level. I was asking product managers, just tell me about your role, tell me about your goals for the year, what are the biggest challenges, what keeps you up at night? I think it's really important to understand the context in which your customers operate before you sort of get to your problem hypotheses, because I'm trying to understand, in the grand scheme of things, what is it that they worry about and how might what we are trying to work on fit into that. So this is why I ask these questions. Then I get a little bit deeper into the problem space and I ask, how and when do you generally get customer feedback or do research? And we kept it really broad because I don't want to over-define the area. I want to hear how they talk about this. And then I ask them, and this is really important because when you're doing interviews, you don't want people to generalize too much. I'll ask them, tell me about your most recent experience, what made it easy, what made it frustrating or hard, and what did you use to do it? Like, what other substitutes are there? And then I will ask them, because you're asking about a recent experience, how similar was your most recent experience to how you typically do this? And that helps you get additional context. And finally, just maybe, if we have some early ideas for what this solution will look like, I might show wireframes or sketches just to get a reaction, not to the flow, but to the overall kind of, is this valuable? Now that we've talked about all your problems, would this solve any of the problems you talked about? But when you do these interviews, think like 80–90% needs discovery, 10 to 20% solution. Like, prevent yourself from getting into the solution space as much as you can. It's supremely important. And then what I've done is we're doing these interviews, and then I'm going back to my stakeholders in that set of concentric circles that I talked about, and I'm sharing the findings. This was an example agenda for a readout that we did with our stakeholders. This was a slide from an executive review. What I wanted to talk about with this audience was, what did we learn about PMs, their roles, their responsibilities? What was their usage of research and data like? What were their pain points and use cases? And maybe what were their reactions to early solution ideas? So just an example of how we'd share this. And then this is, I actually write out like, who is the customer, what is their problem? And I told my organization, we're gonna talk about who is our customer, what is their problem, and then we will talk about the best and lightest weight solution. And so this was the customer problem statement that I wrote out after we had gone through a couple of rounds of research. So what we did is we started by interviewing about 15 IC product managers, about 25 VPs of product. We then, that helped us refine our understanding of the problem and the customer. We then sent out a survey to about 200 folks. And then, again, refining understanding of customer and problem, we began to think about some of the solutions and began to iterate on design and did some usability testing as well. So several rounds and validating at every stage. When I share these findings, I actually phase out how I share these findings, and I think that's important. So phase one is always just focused on who is the customer, what is their problem. What I don't like to do, which is a little unusual, is share designs and solution thinking early. So I actually force everybody to have one meeting with me where we just talk about the customer and the problem, and I ground them in that. And then that also makes sure that my core team is aligned on the customer and the problem, and then we're working ahead on solution. So then as the core team is working ahead on solution, I'm going out to my stakeholders, and we're talking about customer and problem. And then we're validating solution with the core team. I've kind of gone through and gotten sort of alignment and feedback about the customer problem, and then we come back with the solution as we validated it. So I come back with solution ideas. I commit to timelines and milestones, right? I'm not talking about the feature set, but I'm going to say we're going to have an alpha. So for instance, we had time-boxed our research over several rounds. We started mid-August. By mid-September, we had run all of those things that I talked about. Like we had done those qualitative interviews, we had surveyed, we had actually gone through a couple of iterations of prototypes. So then when we came back, we said, okay, now it's September. By October, we want to stand up an alpha version of this product. We don't know what it looks like as yet, but I want an alpha version. I want something that we can test in about like 2 to 4 weeks. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And only then will I come back and talk about designs. And at every stage, I'm regrounding everybody in, this was the problem. Remember, we talked about that. Now we're going to talk about the solution. And often, even before I show designs, I actually just write out a set of features and a set of solution ideas. The thing that I like to avoid most is that argument over red button, blue button, drop-down menu, carousel. I don't care. Those are like the least important things for an executive team to worry about. But if you show designs without showing any context, you get into that quibbling. And to me, that's like one of the most horrific conversations to be in. I don't know about you, but I hate red button, blue button conversations with my CEO. He's not here, so he won't be offended. And like I said, you want to reinforce that message every time. And I know this seems intense. I promise you, you can actually never repeat this enough. So you want to keep reinforcing that because it's a new product. It's a big change for folks. You've gone through who is the customer, what is their problem. You've built that alignment and that understanding. Now you're thinking about what is the best solution for that customer and their problem, but also what is the lightest weight solution. It's supremely important to get product out into the market because you can learn more and faster. And so I always say both best and lightest when I talk to my team to reinforce mapping to customer needs, but also a need for speed. What I do with my team after we've sort of understood our customer needs is we actually brainstorm as a team and we go through the exercise of mapping solutions to needs. It builds a discipline in the team of every time we talk about a solution, we have to map it back to a customer need. What I have found is that if you don't do this, people tend to wander. I think you've all been there. People have pet projects that they want to do. There's something that they've always wanted to build. And somehow those things just keep reappearing regardless of the customer need. So what I did with my team is I came, and depending on the team, I will do it a little differently. With my team in particular, I came with this framework where I listed all the customer needs down the left-hand side, And then I would, with the team, kind of brainstorm solutions. So I had filled out the left-hand side and I left the right-hand side blank so that we could brainstorm solutions. Sometimes I have also in the past come with both sides filled out if I have ideas and I want the team. But when I do that, what I'll tell the team is, this is a starting point. I want us to rip this all apart and start again. But if I have ideas and I want us to move over more quickly, I will seed both sides of this. But this is how we brainstorm solutions. We talk about them and we map them to needs. This was the matrix that we used. And then I will reuse this to communicate out. But then what you will end up with is a set of solutions often. I will tell the team, let's come up with multiple solutions for each of these needs, and let's begin to sort of test them. And what we would do is just really quickly, and this is actually a slide that I use. I love those like design sprint pictures where everybody's in one room and there are all these Post-its on the wall. You've all seen them. We have an entirely remote team. So not everybody could be in a room. So what I did is I literally like put this slide together. I put Post-its, like virtual Post-its, on the slide. And I told everybody, I want you to take 5 minutes in this brainstorm, take a sticky, like in Google Slides, write down your ideas, and then we'll talk about them and map them. It's a great way in Google Slides to sort of simulate this idea of having stickies on a wall. And we would map all of our ideas against effort and impact, right? Because I'm looking for lightest, best solution. So then you have a couple of solution ideas, and I want to validate those before we get to designing or building. So a really useful trick or handy tip that we used was we would actually put together a set of landing pages for a couple of different solution ideas. And this is a template that we use. Anybody can do it. This is like a Google slide template. You just write out a value proposition, a couple of features, and maybe a couple of sentence descriptions about the solution that you're looking to build. So you can test a couple of variations. And we would send this out through UserTesting. And I ask for feedback on these templates and test landing pages. What I'm asking a tester to do, I ask them, like, can you explain what this is? Supremely important to understand if people even understand what your product does. What's the most compelling thing? What's the least compelling thing? These are the types of questions I'm getting. It's really, really helpful to have your prospective customers describe your product in their own words. What we would then do is take what we heard and use that to refine how we talked about our products. And when you ask them what's most and least compelling, that's a really easy way to narrow in on a set of features. So we would test that, we would narrow down our solution, and then we would go back and share our solution with our stakeholders, right? So the core team did this, we got aligned around it, and then we start sharing it back out. You always, when you're sharing a solution, I found it really helpful to always provide context on how we had validated it. Again, reinforcing, hey, this is our idea for a solution, but we validated it with customers, so don't quibble with me about buttons and colors and your pet feature. This is based in evidence. And then actually when I present the solutions, I would present that matrix that I showed you, where every customer need is mapped to a solution and a feature set. So again, you're grounding everybody in this solution meets a need. And what I often did, as I mentioned, is I would just share that value proposition and just a list of features as text. That table is what I shared first, and then we would share designs last. It's unusual. My design team was really surprised when I did this. And I warned everybody. I said, we're going to talk about the customer problem. We're not going to talk about designs. And it's different, but I think it's supremely important. And then you've shared this information. As a team, we were always asking ourselves, and I worked with an amazing tech lead, David, who always pushed me, actually, to say, you know, we have all these customer needs, we have these solution ideas. What is the thing that we can stand up in the next 1 to 3 weeks to test our assumptions? So once we had gone through a couple of iterations of validating our prototypes with testers in the field, we started to think about, okay, now we're going to build this product. And what David said is, hey, let's just stand up in about 3 weeks a working version. It's not going to be pixel perfect, But it was really important to get an end-to-end working version of the product out the door so that we could also de-risk some of those engineering assumptions. You have to de-risk the engineering work as well. And so within about 3 to 4 weeks, we had an end-to-end working version of our product that we actually started testing internally with product managers and getting their feedback, but also sending out and doing qualitative interviews with prospective customers. We did what I like to do, was actually come to conferences like this and work the booths out there, and actually pitch. Once we had narrowed in on some of these ideas, I would just pitch people at the booth on some of these ideas to continue to validate and get feedback from the field, and show them actually that end-to-end working version and get some of their feedback. So let's recap a bit, right? With Product Insight, it was a huge strategic bet for the company. We set aggressive goals for ourselves. Like I told everybody that within about 3 to 4 months, we would have a product that would be ready for our sales teams to start selling and ready for customers to start beta testing. An important realization for us is that I wanted the sales teams to be trained to sell earlier than the product would be ready, but I wanted a product in about an alpha and beta stage so that we could start getting customer feedback of a working product. We had been getting customer feedback along the way. And so for us, we went from sort of idea to a working version and a sellable version of the product in about 3 to 4 months, which was supremely important. And we went through all of the stages that I talked about. So if there's stuff that I want you to take away from this talk, it's 2 things, right? Think about how you build a shared understanding of these questions for your product area. And Product Insight for us was a big strategic bet, but I have found that it's useful to do this for different sizes of products. You will be surprised how important, even for the smallest feature, it is to be able to answer these questions to really maximize speed and time to customer value. So who is my customer? What is their problem? What's the best and lightest weight solution I can build for them? Think about how you're refining your understanding of these questions. You're never going to get to certainty. Just think about iterating on that understanding. And then think about for your organization and for your next product feature or launch, who do you really need to get bought in to make that product a reality? Who is going to represent that product experience and help you realize that and get that alignment early and get it often? So that's it. Thank you so much for everything.
So we have a lot of great, wonderful questions for you. I'm going to kind of hit the highlights here. Jumping into, Daniel asks, getting the whole team involved in gathering customer feedback can be costly and distracting for engineers. How do you create a good balance between teamwork versus focus?
Yeah, totally. I get this question a lot. So I tend to drive a lot of the research myself or work with the researcher to do it if we have one available, right? And most of the time, we have the luxury of having one available. I'm still driving the research. I'm doing most of the heavy lifting. I'm offering up the opportunity for anybody to get involved. But if they don't want to get involved, I will do things like summarize our findings for them. I will share updates as we go. So it's not a requirement that you sit through a bunch of interviews, but I will find many different ways to communicate what we've learned. And I think this debate comes up a lot, and I've talked to engineers who have said, but like, I just want to focus on building and you tell me what to build. Fundamentally, what I have found is that if they have no context, and you have to give them context in lightweight ways or heavyweight ways, depending on the person, they're really, that time spent focusing, they're just focused on the wrong things, and it catches up with you later. I always think in product development, there's like a price you have to pay. You have to like pay the bill when it comes due. You can either put in the time up front, where you're more in control, or you can rework a bunch of stuff later, which is a far more painful process for an engineering team. So that's also what I tell them. I'm like, we can put in a little bit work now, you can be involved and it'll be light, or you can or we can rework it later. And I think that's important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Okay, one last question. When Casey asks, when asking the question to stakeholders, how does this resonate with your experience? What happens when your assertion doesn't resonate with a stakeholder's experience?
So this is why I always come armed with data and evidence. So, because otherwise what happens is you end up in this world of anecdotal, well, I talked to this one customer, or the last time. I think the worst is when CEOs test websites and they find like the one thing that's wrong. What I'll say is like, this is all the evidence. This is why it's valid. This is why it's rigorous. Now tell me how that resonates with you. And what that helps people do is it helps them contextualize like how their experience may be different. So that's kind of, I come armed with evidence and data, and I constantly reinforce the validity of what we've done. But I still, I want to know. People have a lot of experience. I want to know, and then we might have a hard conversation about, is that something that we think is going to be wide-ranging?
Excellent.
Yeah.
Let's give Tanya another round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.